everybody, and welcome to the Town of Rhinebeck Planning Board's meeting of Monday, May 19th, 2025. I am aware of the fact that Tom is not going to be joining us tonight, and Greg is coming in now, so he's officially riding into the room and going to his designated parking space. And welcome, Craig.
Thank you.
So let me begin by saying I don't believe there are any changes to the meeting agenda, correct? You have Jim's meeting notes. Any comments or questions? None? I'm hearing none. May I have a motion to approve the meeting notes? Motion second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. You have in draft form the May 5th minutes. Any corrections, additions? Okay, may I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes?
I'll move that.
Second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. Correspondence and announcements? Anything to come before the board? All right. Let me just, for Keith, again, we have a note on the agenda this evening calling attention to the Darren Prince and Kelly Swiss public hearing, which was scheduled for May 19th. That would be tonight, was postponed and continued to the July 21st, 2025 planning board meeting. So the first public hearing of this evening is that of Statsburg Holdings LLC, 3652 Route 9G, site plan and special use permit for a flooring shelter.
So we've provided you with the proper notices now. We also published, Mr. Freeman is directed to provide you with an affidavit regarding that. We appreciate Sean coming out for the site visit, and we had a good review, I think, of that. He made some suggestions regarding putting boulders along Route 9G. We provided you with an updated landscaping plan that incorporates that, as well as the other landscaping features that you were seeking to have added. We were requested to provide information regarding the individual who delineated the wetlands. We've done that. We've adjusted the site plans so that there's no development in any of the boundaries. The wetland boundary is not within the site, but the setback. So we've moved it so there's no setback involvement. And we're still pursuing the easement issues. There's no development within the Central Hudson easement, but we're just trying to get a sign off from Central Hudson. We've been in communication with them, but have yet to receive anything just within the back of them acknowledging that we need to request. The Department of Health has been to the site, and subsequent to their visit, they, in principle, agreed to the solution that our project engineer has proposed, and I think you're very close, Joel, to submitting those plans. So that's in the works. We're still in touch with Transportation, DOT, regarding the road cut. There's another application that has to be done on that. They're treating it as a new application, even though we're proposing to use the exact same road cut as was previously there. We find that there's more than an acre of disturbance, and so we're going to have to do the stormwater management review. So that is being worked on as well by our project engineer. And I have a question regarding the DEC. I was talking to Kim about that. before the meeting started. We have been in touch with DEC. We did formally ask for a jurisdictional letter. We've never received a written response, but DEC has been to the site. They reviewed the wetland demarcation. They reviewed the setback that Joel put on the map. There is email correspondence saying that they're in agreement with it, but that they will not be providing us with further documentation other than that. And that email exchange has been provided to the board. So I'm not sure at this point, whether we need to go through the process of sending them a certified letter requesting jurisdiction determination when they've actually been to the site and have agreed to what the project engineer and the wetland expert set forth. So perhaps the board would give us some guidance as to what more you need us to pursue. So the matter continues in front of the ZBA. As you might know, they had canceled their meeting for this month due to lack of quorum. We're on their agenda for June. So I think that's pretty much brings you up to date with all of our efforts since we met last. Did I miss anything? So, any questions from the board or from the public?
First, and then I believe we just got the landscape changes today, so maybe we want to walk through that. But I'm not sure everybody's had a chance to review it themselves. So do you want to just point out the changes, Tom?
Well, you asked for a landscape plan. We had not previously provided you with a landscape plan. So I think it's a very thoughtful plan that is tries to put some buffer between G and the project. I think there's an effort to use local plantings that match up with the historical nature of the area. And I think if you go through it, you'll get some pretty good ideas of what the landscape architect is suggesting. Her name's Melissa Angel. She's no relationship to our family, so that's just an aside.
Hey, Jim?
I haven't had an opportunity to look at this landscaping plan other than to flip through it for about 2 minutes before the meeting here. I guess my question that's on it right now is that it looks like there are two options: island with gathering area and one with no gathering area, which obviously has different landscaping. I don't know if there's a preference or an explanation. We'll obviously have to.
We're happy to go either way. We look to your board to suggest to us whether you would like one versus the other.
So we'll have time to review that as we move forward. So I guess I'll just go back to just a couple technical things, not a lot. On this plan, we did note that we have the new 100-foot setback from the wetlands. It does come right up to the edge of the parking lot here. So the reason you would need a wetlands permit from the planning board would be if there's any disturbance in this wetland area. So if you're going to build right up to that edge, you're going to have to mark that and delineate that nothing's going in there. You don't have trucks going in there to do all this. So all of your paving work and everything's got to be done on this side of that.
There's no paving actually.
I'm sorry, well, the parking area. All the disturbance has to be done outside of that buffer. So you'll want to put up silt fence and something, make sure nobody enters that area. So you don't have any wetland issues. The only other comment I had, again, having not looked at the landscape plan, is that Craig had mentioned, I think it was Craig had mentioned the Huckleberry Bush rail corridor and the rail line. We were here last time, and I actually dug into that a little bit and talked to someone at the county. This is the old rail line alignment, and the zoning actually, if you can actually kind of see, there's a line here, but zoning actually has zoning district LCT that runs along the kind of eastern, southern side of the property here. That's the Land Conservation Trails zoning district. and is intended to provide for conservation, open space, and eventual public recreational use of the former Hucklebush Rail Corridor as shown on the zoning map. And I'm reading this from what's in the code. It says the Hucklebush Rail Corridor has been recommended as a multi-use trail corridor for over 30 years by the town of Rhinebeck, and that was back when the zoning code was written. And is recommended as a trail corridor on the New York State Greenway Trails Plan. Development proposals should include reservation of the rail corridor area for future trail and open space use, but such proposals shall not be penalized for reserving the rail corridor acreage when calculating density. If public access to recreational use is not feasible for an individual parcel of land when development proposals are approved, then such proposals should include reservation of these lands for future conservation and open space use. I believe that what you've provided here, which I think was 30 feet, and your side area buffered for 35 feet. So you probably have about 30 feet to the driveway here. I think that's plenty of area in reserve for a trail to go through if it ever happens in the future. Other board members can speak to it. I've never heard a word about this trail going through. That doesn't say we can't. You don't still have to reserve that area for the potential for future use. So I want to make you aware of it. I think it should be put on the plans, demarcating that we are in the LCT and that area should be reserved.
Do you have a model note that we use?
I would just pull some of the language from the code, noting that it is the Hucklebush Trail, and that area is reserved through the LCT zoning district, which is on the map. Just to advise that essentially that area that's shown as the side yard for all back, reasons other than the driveway area shouldn't be developed or touched by the applicant. It needs to be left in reserve for potential future public or trail use. So like I say, I think you're fine with that width, even though there are floodplain in there, but that's just kind of par for the course sometimes with trails, and I think with where the alignments that's zoning district. So that additional note really is my only other comment at this point in time, based on the new information.
Sean?
Yes, Tom, I talked to Tom and he was traveling, and so he wasn't able to make it, but the feedback that I received, and obviously I think it was similar to our feedback from the board during our first meeting, was softening the buffer off of 9G. It also, it's not close to 9G, but there's definitely, it wasn't more than probably 2 or 3 months ago, there was a car sitting up in the power lines after an accident. And so I suggested potentially putting boulders along that property. It was noted, but that is a warehouse, so there would never be, very rarely would there ever be human beings in that space. But it was just definitely this close. But obviously the other areas were about impervious surface was another conversation about the driveway, so we did talk about that. And it does make sense when you're on site what they're trying to accomplish there. The Central Hudson easement is basically I don't know the official term, but it's like an end pole. It's the only thing on it. I couldn't imagine them ever continuing that way. And it is along where they're putting driveways, so if anything, it'll actually be probably slightly easier if they ever had to use that area for them to access it via vehicle. But I don't really see a potential issue there, but that's not my opinion. That's up to them. Other than that, obviously there would be. Obviously, there's a lot of concrete on site that would need to be demoed and taken off the site or buried on site, but there's some there's a lot of old concrete on that site. I don't know what the original purpose of it was, but I think the real takeaway was that, and one of the things we talked about is how do we put up this new building, not have it be in stark contrast, but also be an improvement to the area. And from my looking through the landscape plan, I think we've accomplished that really well. So I want to say hats off because I know that was one of the things that we talked quite a bit about. So other than that, I really don't have any other takeaways.
There are other slides that show boulders along G next to the plane.
It's just a small suggestion of like how do we create a barrier without it being some kind of pole or something like that, but. Because I think it's like, I want to say it's 17 or 20 feet off the white line or something like that is where the building is located. So it is, if car goes out of control, it's in a way.
So one thing you will have to do when you land on a landscaping plan is update your site plan to show this. And obviously, I don't know exactly where you're proposing the rocks, it's on the landscaping plan, but DOT is going to want to have a look at this. These look like they're pretty close to the road. I told them where they're coming from, but I'm sure they're going to have something to say about the placement of those.
It's off the DOT land.
Always a good rule.
And we will update the site plan. I think Joel wanted to have a sense of how you want to proceed with the landscaping plan, then once that's been clarified, we will go forward as suggested.
Yeah, and I'd say back to your comment about the gathering area, is that going to be used for just like lunch, meetings, potentially?
I think it was just an idea of softening the space
Yeah,
and making it more accessible, but again, we provide two different alternatives and they're happy to do either.
yeah, I don't really see any issue with the gathering area. I think it's, I was happy to see, I think the landscape plan was really thought out. I think that was a big comment for our boards. How do we, this is a big white building going up, right? It's an eyesore with a very bright building now, so. But it's, yeah.
All right, I'll ask other planning board members for comments, questions.
Yeah, well, Jim, thanks for clearing that up. I did look at the maps myself and noticed that the alignment goes right along the southern edge and not where the easement is. But if you go behind Phantom Gardner, you can kind of see the remains of the rail line, and the utility lines run right parallel with that. So it would kind of make sense that it would, parallel across the street, and that it just kind of dead ends there.
Yeah, to look really close at the zoning, it's a fine line, but it is on this property. So
Yeah.
that setback area, I think, is fine.
Yeah, and it does seem to work with the existing plan, so that's a good thing. I kind of like the idea of the gathering space, and I would point to the Art of Building office that it's now for sale. It used to be the Costco or the Botini or something like that, an oil delivery place. And, they made it nice, and one of the nice things about it that makes the site really humane is there are outdoor gathering areas. And even if they're not occupied all the time, it just gives a better sense of community, so I would encourage that. I think it's a good thing to have. It's not like you're opening a restaurant or anything like that. And is there a change in elevation from where the building is to the surface of the highway, or is it pretty much?
We just forwarded new elevations that would show that. I'm sorry that we couldn't get them to you earlier, but we do have that.
Okay, because you have a plan for planting some pretty substantial trees along that parallel with the roadway, but when they're young, they're not gonna stop anything. But if you have that protection of the embankment,
So it's, as you can see, it's a slug.
yeah, okay. All right, those are my thoughts.
Others?
I like the suggestion about the gathering space, and I thought that was a well-said idea about, creating a sense of community. Just out of curiosity, there's nothing in the code that references what the clearance should be on the remains of that potential trail? Like, there's no suggestion of 10 feet on each side or something?
No, it's,
Okay, it came up when we were reviewing the Phantom Gardner expansion plans in the back several years ago when we put the new building in the back, and we didn't find any detailed information at that time either.
Well, then 30 feet sounds good to me.
it's, I mean, if a multi-use trail went through, it'd be 10 to 12 feet, probably 12, maybe 14. So there's plenty of room there to work with. It is in the floodplain, but that's pretty common, and I think it'll work if when that trailer comes.
It comes all the way there. It started in Rhinecliff, the Hucklebush line. And so if you look at it, historically where it cuts through, even when they were developing the property adjacent to Astor Courts and all of that, that came into play there. The likelihood that there could ever be a massive connected trail through here is very slim because of the development that's happened along the corridor since then. I'm not saying you couldn't get bits and pieces of the trail, but to reconnect an entire trail would be difficult. So I think for the fact that it's feasible and doable is about all we can hope to achieve here.
And I would just add that we've done a bunch of trail easement work, and typically, with the organizational view, the width has everything to do with how much it costs to install a trail and how much it costs to maintain it.
So narrows too.
Typically, the sponsor organizations are not looking for something big and wide.
Got it, I too like the gathering space. I appreciate the opportunity to look at both of them, but I think that is a nice, it humanizes the property. And, you know, prospective clients and people looking at things, it might be nice to just sit outside from time to time. So I think it's a nice amenity. Let me ask if there's anyone here from the public wishing to speak to this application. If not, I think we are awaiting just
Outside EDC,
Outside
input
agencies.
and ZBA.
and the ZBA, and that will be on in June.
Yeah, it's on the agenda for June for the public hearing. So a resolution is probably prepared at the earliest in June.
Okay? So it's a matter of continuing it to when? Is the question. We can continue it a month, Tom?
Why don't we do a month and we're able to pull things together and we'll advise you. We're doing our best.
Sure you are. We hear
It's
about health
challenging,
department
yeah.
challenges all the
And
time.
if you could perhaps give me some guidance, and I don't need it tonight, just regarding the DEC and
Yeah, I'll
what
look
you're-
closer at that.
what you're looking for us to do at that point.
Yeah.
We've kind of exhausted what we've been able to do on our own, but we can work at it more if we can use suggestions.
All right, so we'll encourage you and Kim to discuss
Right.
that.
Yeah, no,
unless-
I'll talk to Jim too, because I know he knows a little bit about the jurisdictional determination. And it kind of makes sense in the sense that they kind of, you know, the whole point of the jurisdictional determination is to determine if there's wetlands on the property and how to work with them. And the email that you forwarded said that they agreed with your delineation. So I think it sounds like we're good. I just like a little bit more opportunity to think on it.
So you'll be able to proffer an opinion before the next meeting?
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah,
All right,
I
thanks
want to
for
say
all your
also
hard
thank you
work.
for taking our suggestions.
May I have a motion to continue? That would be
June 16th.
June 16th.
So moved.
A motion second?
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed, abstention, motion carries. Thank you.
Thanks.
That concludes the public hearing portion of this evening's meeting. And takes us into old business. The first being the application of Portia Bach and Craig Schiffler. You recall we're still waiting on the DEC jurisdictional determination. Did you get a chance to speak to them?
They have some things to work on with that, I guess. So
They still have
Do you
things.
want to go a month out
Yes.
to June 16th?
So may I have a motion to go June 6th? 16th, I'm sorry, apologize.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstention. Just as a point here, as Jim would like to say, this, as we're all getting used to this new DEC jurisdictional determination and the lack of information that's available, on the surface, this looked like a completely straightforward, why in the world would they have anything to look at here, and we just don't know why they chose to go there and what is happening. So that's just to say we're all still a bit stymied by what this means and how to work our way through it. And I feel very badly for Ms. Bach and Mr. Shipley that it's taking so long, but since DEC has expressed an interest, our hands are really tied at this point. The next bit of old business is that of Alexander Wright, 23 Buist Road, site plan, special use permit, wetlands permit, tree removal, and light brush clearing. I'm going to turn it over to Kim to walk us through where we've been with this one. You know, this has been ongoing for some time. And we're prepared to discuss some possible solutions this evening.
Sure. So as the planning board might remember, this application came before you I believe they received a notice of violation in 2023. I think it was October, November of 2023, because they had cleared out some shrubs and bushes and existing vegetation in a wetland buffer in the process of installing solar panels. So it came in front of the planning board because of the disturbance in the wetlands and removal of trees. And so we've been working with the rights. The rights came in front of us, in front of the planning board, for wetlands permit and special use permit and I believe site plan. And one of the questions that was first raised was, you know, in terms of remediation plans, you know, they didn't just want to, the planning board didn't just want to plant just any old shrubs or trees. They wanted to make sure that whatever was planted would survive in the wetlands buffer and would help remediate the problems. There were some issues raised about possible floodings and, you know, exacerbating an already wet area. So we reached out to Hudsonia. They did a report to review the landscaping plans, and the applicant has incorporated those designs. One of the things was that what Hudsonia recommended increasing the number of shrubs and where to plant those. They have been incorporated into the plans. And we have just been in touch with Brian Tam, the zoning enforcement officer, to discuss how we can resolve the remediation. Brian is fine going forward with Hudsonia's recommendation. And the applicant will be paying the invoice that Hudsonia has done for their review. And upon the full payment of Hudsonia's invoices and any outstanding consultants, and following Hudsonia's recommendations, Brian will consider that the violation will have been remedied and satisfied.
So that's what we've been discussing in preparation for this evening, and we'd like your feedback and observations about. That's okay.
Yeah, wasn't part of the application solar also? I guess is this separate from that?
What?
I don't, do they need solar permit? Not from the planning board.
Need a permit.
They just,
Okay, it would just be
Rooftop.
it was intended to be rooftop solar and which doesn't need approval by the planning board, but it was because of the violation.
okay.
That the solar. So going forward, if we agree as a board to accept the Hudsonia report as the standard by which Brian will lift the stop work order and the notice of violation with no further penalties, and with the final payment and sign off of the outstanding escrow, which was to go to pay Hudsonia and any other consultant fees, as Kim mentioned, then Brian will lift the stop work order and the notice of violation, and they can proceed with their solar installation, having satisfied the issues that were raised by the stop work order and notice of violation.
And start implementing the remediation plans
Right.
too.
Well, that makes absolute sense. That's the reason we brought experts in.
Yes. So, what, do we adopt a specific resolution tonight?
So I looked at Jim's draft that he has in his memo. I just added a little bit more detail about the purpose, why they were in front of the board, the violations and the Hudsonia report and the remediation plan. And then I just provided that, upon the condition of implementing the remediation plan, making sure that those shrubs that they plant are maintained in good order throughout the life of the property, and the payment of any outstanding escrow bills, that the violation will be satisfied. I did also include that it kind of gives the zoning enforcement officer the ability to go on site after the shrubs are planted to make sure they're in accordance with the remediation plan, and to also go back in a year to make sure that those plantings have taken and are in good health. Again, there is also a requirement that those plantings will be maintained throughout the life of the property, be in good working condition, and if any plants die, those have to be replanted, again, in accordance with the Hudsonia report. Excuse me. So this is, that language has just been incorporated into Jim's resolution that he already drafted, which can be up for the board's consideration. It is an unlisted action, so before that resolution is read, I think Jim has a seeker resolution.
I have a question, Kim. What happens if the property changes hands?
So because this is a condition for the life of the property, not just based on the, not just based on the property ownership. So that condition should follow any subsequent
Interesting.
owners.
Awesome.
And I would add that we did have an opportunity to discuss this proposed solution with Meineke Baumeister, who was in agreement with this solution, and subsequent to that forwarded what would be the final payment, so that escrow has been brought up to the level that it needed to be at in order to move forward. So it was a solution that was acceptable to them and acceptable to the zoning administrator, and assuming that you have no concerns or issues that are substantial, we can let Jim proceed with his part of this. And but are there any questions or comments right now about it?
Sounds like a good solution.
Okay, Jim?
All right. First thing we'll have to do, because it is an unlisted action, is we'll have to go through our short environmental assessment form, which I've done before. So just a verbal yes or no would be good for these, but I do want to run through them one at a time. Will the proposed action create a material conflict with an adopted land use plan or zoning regulations?
No.
Will the proposed action result in change in the use or intensity of use of the land?
No.
Will the proposed action impair the character or quality of the existing community?
No.
Will the proposed action have an impact on the CEA? The answer is no, we don't have any in the town. Will the proposed action result in adverse change in the existing level of traffic or affect existing infrastructure for mass transit, biking, and walking?
No.
Will the proposed action cause an increase in the use of energy and fail to incorporate reasonably available energy conservation or renewable energy opportunities?
No.
Will the proposed action impact existing public or private water supplies or public and private wastewater treatment utilities?
No or small.
Will the proposed action impair the character or quality of important historic, archaeological, architectural, or aesthetic resources? Will the proposed action result in adverse change to natural resources?
No.
Will-
We need improvement.
Will the proposed action result in an increase in the potential for erosion, flooding, or drainage problems?
Increase? No.
I think it does the opposite, doesn't it?
Increase it, no, it's gonna decrease it.
Correct.
Will the proposed action create a hazard to environmental resources or human health?
No.
Okay, so with that, then, I would like to read the secret approval resolution. So for Alexander Wright, site plan, special use permit, wetlands permit, proposed action is seeking approval for site plan, special use permit, and wetlands from the planning board. Alexander Wright undertook tree and brush removal for solar panel installation and seeks approval for the work already undertaken. The Town of Rhinebeck Planning Board and its rule is duly established lead agency under seeker, and upon review of the upon review and completion of the short EAF and associated information, hereby issues a negative declaration under seeker, deeming an environmental impact statement is not required, and stating such will not be prepared in its consideration of site plan, special use permit, and wetlands permit for the property at 23 Boyce Road, Rhinebeck, New York, within the RM1 zoning district. In taking this action, the planning board approves the project to move forward, and proposed actions are hereby approved for implementation. We will attach to this the short EAF they provided, part 1. The part 2 we just did, and this is the part 3 we're discussing now.
And then after a motion.
So moved.
Second? I'll call for the vote. Craig?
Aye.
Edna? Aye. Tom?
Aye.
Sharon? Aye. Elise? Aye. And I vote aye.
All right, thank you. Next part,
I'm just asking for clarification. Have we closed the public hearing on this?
Yes.
Okay.
the next part is the approval resolution, which again, Kim had mentioned, she went through and has added in some additional detail. She did cover it, so I'll go through this relatively quickly. We're reaffirming the actions unlisted for which coordinated environmental quality review is not required, and completed parts 1, 2, and 3 of the seeker form. That seeker resolution, approval resolution has been completed. With respect to the removal of trees and existing vegetation, they received a notice of violation from the zoning enforcement officer dated blank, dated
October 20th, 2023.
October 20.
And it's 2023.
23, yeah. They provided a remediation plan to compensate for the removal of vegetation from the wetland buffer. Planning board hired Hudsonia as an independent neutral consultant to review the remediation plan, determine the viability and effectiveness to mitigate the damage and potential damage caused by the removal, and provide any improvements and recommendations if necessary. Through the report by Hudsonia, dated November 15th, 2024, they recommended more extensive shrub planting on the western end of the house yard, part of the buffer zone, and in the wetland, and noted that one proposed species was unsuitable due to deer population that may damage it. Hudsonia recommended the applicant plant twice as many shrubs as they initially planned. to replace the removal, which will total 40 shrubs. Further recommended the applicant plant at least 8 shrubs to replace the 4 trees removed. They recommended the applicant plant a total of 48 shrubs to remediate the removal of trees and existing vegetation. The applicant has incorporated Hudsonic's recommendation in their planting plans, and as we've just noted, they have provided the outstanding fees and reimbursable amounts due to the town of Rhinebeck. So with respect to the wetlands permit, asking the board to find the proposed work and intended use consistent with the general standards, just like the wetlands, and granting the wetland permit conditioned upon the site plan approval. With respect to the special use permit, finding the proposed use is consistent with the general standards for special use permits, and granting the special use permit. And with respect to the application for site plan approval, finding the work and intended use is consistent with the site plan criteria and the site plan by LaBelle Associates dated March 18th, 2024, as well as the wetland stream delineation maps dated November 2023. Requires the applicant to ensure the work is consistent with the recommendations in the Hudsonia report and ensuring that they are maintaining good health as skin noted. Allowing zoning enforcement officer or other appropriate town agent to inspect and confirm the plantings and shrubs once they prior to the issuance of a permit for the solar panel installation. Authorizing the planning board chair to stamp and sign the above cited site plan, subject to the 3 conditions listed below. And reminding everyone that taking this action, you're authorizing the planning board secretary to provide the approval resolution to the applicant along with details on next steps to finalize the process. Reminding everyone that all plan sketches and other materials submitted to the town of Rhinebeck Building Department for any required permits must match those submitted to the planning board or they may be rejected and have to come back to the planning board and start over.
I move that we accept that. Thank you, Edmund. May I have a second?
Second.
I will poll the board. Louise?
Aye.
Sharon? John?
Aye.
Edmund?
Aye.
Greg?
Aye.
And I vote aye. And special thanks to John and Kim for working this through and adapting the resolution so that I think we'll come out with a good solution here.
Yeah, thanks to the board here for working just with everybody involved. I agree, I think it's a good resolution.
And I think, I like the precedent it sets for being able to work it through and, being able to work with the zoning administrator to find a fair and equitable solution in what's been, a thorny situation for everybody all around. So thanks to everybody. Next up this evening on the schedule is Wildflower School, Bern, 7085 and 7091 Route 9, site plan and special use permit, daycare and nursery school. And at the request of the applicant, this is being proposed to be continued until when? 1 month, is it?
Yeah.
1 month. To my knowledge, and Jim would know more, we do not yet have, feedback back from DOT. There are letters going back and forth about final details about this and final details about that, which is not surprising. So I know the applicant is anxious and waiting for that. But I would also, you probably also, if you had a chance to look at it, received a correspondence this afternoon that was submitted to us by the neighbor who has consistently raised concerns about the application and in quite detailed format. We have not been responding and wading into areas that we did not believe were the purview of the planning board. And so John and Kim, I think, have had a chance to talk about this and have some ideas about what could transpire here. We want to be in a position to acknowledge that the neighbor is raising these concerns, but, we need to find the appropriate, proper way to respond to her. So, Kim, I'll ask you to join in again.
Yes, I had a chance to briefly look at the email today. I kind of at least skimmed it. A lot of what the neighbor is raising is, the impact of the easement area and her access. And, the easement, whatever transpires within the easement is really out of the planning board's jurisdiction. It's a personal matter between the 2 adjoining landowners. And I think what we might consider doing, John and I, is just writing a brief letter just to explain the planning board's jurisdiction and authority. The main thing that we wanted to be concerned about in terms of the planning board's jurisdiction is to make sure that there was no unauthorized work that was being done on the neighbor's property. At the last meeting, that was discussed thoroughly with the applicant, and Jim had raised that question, and it's been addressed that there is no work going to be done on the actual neighbor's property. The easement area is being kept open. So, like I said, I think we're just going to write just a short letter to acknowledge her comment, but just explain the planning board's jurisdiction and the concepts that the planning board has had authority to look over and has done.
And the neighbor certainly has the right and perhaps should be securing her own counsel to provide her advice in this situation. She's been consistently representing herself, and she certainly has the right to hire somebody local or whatever that could come in and represent her. My understanding is she lives out of the area and is rarely here, which is why we get her comments in writing and not expressed. Once or twice she's been here in person, but very rarely. So, anybody comment on that?
Excuse me, go ahead.
All right.
Okay.
You go first, and I can go alphabetically if you like.
Yeah, I feel like the whole easement thing, number one, is not really our business, except to the extent that we need to take care that we're not approving something that's going to interfere with that neighbor's use of the property. And I think this applicant has gone out of their way to ensure that that use is maintained. Also, some things about the level of traffic, and wouldn't this be better on a quieter road? It's actually in our zoning code that a nursery school or daycare must be located on a state or county highway. So the fact that this is on a busy road, that's on purpose, and that's consistent with all of our comprehensive plan and all that. It's it's in the rules. So I don't really have a problem with that part of it. Another thing kind of related to the amount of parking, our parking recommendations are stated as maximums, not as minimums. And I wonder at the abundance of parking that's being put on this. I think that the more salient issue is the movement of traffic, so
Okay,
not the
and at this
overall
point,
number of parking.
Relative to this evening's conversation, we'll still have time to talk with the applicant about those.
Yeah. Okay.
Edna?
I have nothing to add to that.
Oh, I'm sorry. But I'm to the right. Sean?
I mean, it'd be nice if the person complaining was also in compliance.
With the what?
If they're also in compliance with their property.
Okay. Anybody
Okay.
else? I would like, I think I'd like a motion authorizing Grant Lyons to proceed to draft a letter to be sent to Christina, how does she pronounce her last name? Lewick. In response to the letter that we received from her today.
It's good enough.
Motion? Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carries.
And I think, just to be clear, that we'll draft that letter and provide a draft to you, but the letter will come from the same.
Okay. Yeah, they'll be drafting it. I'll be fortunately or unfortunately signing it.
Good luck.
Next up under old business is that of Rock Ledge, 492 Acrocook Road, site plan, special use permit, wetlands permit, and condo units. Edna is recusing herself, and Jim, I'll turn it over to you to update us. We've had a request to continue.
We get requests officially?
Did we get anything official, Gretchen, or?
I don't think I have a request. No, so based on the discussions at the last meeting and where we are, the project has received ZBA approval. The secret review has been completed. All requested materials, as far as I can tell, and the town's engineering consultant can tell, have been submitted. And we're at the point, as kind of the last month, of discussing the final steps in the review process. We are in the process of drafting an approval resolution for your consideration that John and Kim are taking a look at the moment. And that's kind of where we stand, so I don't really know, based on before there was much in the way of discussion, so I alerted the applicants to that fact. much for discussion tonight, and we're going to have an approval resolution for tonight. That's really all I have, just kind of an update on where things stand.
Questions, anybody? So we'll be calendaring them. But
I know, John, Kim, what do you?
So we had asked, at the close of the public hearing, we had asked if the applicant would extend, because we have the planning board 62 days, and we weren't sure of the drafting of the resolution. It does push the resolution potentially out to July, but, you know, if we can, we'd like to try to aim for June. I think the applicant has submitted everything, and we'd like to be able to keep the project moving. So, like I said, we're still in the review process of the resolution. If we can provide updates, if we think it's going to take a little longer, we'll let you know.
so we should schedule it for June 16th.
Yeah, June 16th.
Do I need a motion to do that? I'll take one.
So,
A motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carries. The last bit of old business this evening is that of Rhinebeck Villas LLC, New York State Route 1G and Middle Road Site Plan Special Use Permit and Wetland Permit. Good evening.
Good evening, Sean Kemp on behalf of the applicant, Rhinebeck Villas, and I have with me Rob DuPont and Andrew Hollis, owner and member of Rhinebeck Villas. I appreciate the board taking the time to meet with us tonight. Just wanted to kind of bring everybody up to speed, make sure that we remain on the same page. I think we've covered a lot of ground over the past couple of months, which is a good thing, but I don't want anything to stall out. In response to the planning board's comments at the April meeting, the applicant did supply an updated site plan that depicted the access road coming off of Middle Road. That's really the only major change to the updated plan. But I just wanted to draw the board's attention to that change. And then also I had sent an email to Gretchen, and I know that it would be kind of out of the order of how the planning board usually likes to conduct its site visits, but our engineers went and actually staked out the perimeters of the buildings, or the proposed buildings, so that when planning board members did go to the site to inspect it for the site inspection, they'd be able to kind of have some type of orientation of where the buildings were located. So if you would like to, it's staked, and if you'd like to have that site visit sooner than later, it's probably a good idea, although things have been growing pretty fast with all the rain already. But by all means, we remain open to having that site visit happen sooner rather than later for the undergrowth reasons. Then I think just as far as things to do, obviously we'd like to get this to a point where we can open up the public hearing. I believe that the planning board already circulated the notice regarding the lead agency for SECRA. I think that determination or declaration might be able to be made tonight. And then I know, Rob, you had some questions regarding building renderings and what the board would like to see in that regard prior to public hearing, if anything. Rob, if you wanted to go over some of the details that you had.
Sure. Well, I did a detailed presentation back in March. I wasn't at the last meeting in April. Jim was the only one that really had any comments on the site plan, and nobody really had any questions with regards to the buildings. It's been a couple of months. Has anybody, looked at it more closely? Does anybody have any questions or concerns that they'd like to express now? Because the reason I'm asking is, I know that we have to do some renderings of the exteriors to show what the building's going to look like. But before I engage in that, which is a lot of work and effort, I was hoping that maybe I could get some input from the board members if there was anything to date that wasn't good or that somebody found problematic.
Edna? I believe I mentioned this in the past. I had a question about the elevator going up to the second floor hallway, which is exposed to the elements.
Correct.
And to me, that seems strange and unnecessary, and I understand that it's based on square footage limitations, but I was wondering why you would not go to the zoning board of appeals and ask to have that upstairs hallway enclosed, so that in the wintertime, there won't be snow falling into it, and in the summertime, there won't be wind and rain blowing into it. And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, our thoughts are, we're not particularly interested in going for the ZBA asking for that. I met with Brian Tam about this a couple of times with regards to the intention of the zoning ordinance. You know, basically these buildings, the 3 hotel buildings, are a combination between like a hotel and a motel. If you ever stayed at a motel, that's what that's like. The rooms have individual entrances, and then it's covered in protective exterior quarters, but they're not enclosed. We're comfortable with that design, and we don't think it's necessary to enclose it. That's why. And it strictly, I mean, if we were allowed to make the buildings bigger, the design would be different. But since we are limited to 80,000 square feet, that's why we designed it that way. Plus, it'll also look a bit more attractive on the outside. It'll add some three-dimensionality to the buildings, too. What's interesting about it, though, is, you know, when someone is going to their room, they drive up, they park their car, each building has an enclosed entrance lobby with an elevator and an egress stair, and like a little sitting area. That's also where we have our housekeeping facilities too. Because the buildings are so spread out, having a centralized location really isn't feasible for the maintenance of it, for the buildings, especially during turn-down. So that's sort of an enclosed entrance space, and then people pass through that basically back outside again, but protected to go to their individual rooms. So I've never seen a building like that before. Maybe I'm the first one that came up with it, I don't know, but it was born out of necessity, and we weren't planning on asking for any special variances from
So
the ZBA.
it's roof,
Oh,
but
yeah,
it's
it's
not
roof.
enclosed.
Correct. And it's got a decent overhang, rain protection with gutters, so it'll be protected. If it's a blowing squall, then maybe somebody will get it, but for the most part, it is protected. Craig, I got something for you.
Oh.
You've asked a couple of times with regards to the wastewater,
Yes,
what we were discharging into.
yes.
We asked our wastewater engineer that question. He did identify it. He said that we'll be discharging into an unnamed tributary of the Rhinebeck Kill. Okay, so.
Yeah.
That's what I
Did I say
thought.
No,
We thought that was.
Oh, you did?
But we didn't want to, I didn't want to commit to it because I wasn't 100% sure, but now.
Okay. No, thank you for clearing that up.
I will say something else too. I met with Chief Knapp about 2.5 weeks ago, and I showed him our updated site plan that showed the emergency access route. He was very happy with that, both for emergency access for their vehicles in the event of a fire that blocks our main entrance in, and also for in the unlikely event that there would be a fire, that blocks our access here, right? All these people that are in here with their cars need to get out of the site too. So this access way here out to Middle Road would provide that secondary means. We're either going to put a gate or a breakaway chain here they have access to. This will not be a roadway. It'll be some kind of base that can support emergency vehicles, but it's going to be natural. And we'll do a drop curb over here so that vehicles can get in and out without an issue. So that will be updated in more detail. This basically is the concept drawing. So he was in favor of that.
We're going to need that in writing, an email from him or something to state that he's in favor of that.
Oh, sure. Well, Chair Moore, I think you said that the fire department is going to have an opportunity for a formal review of this anyway, right?
Well, what I said to you before was that we would refer it to them.
Right.
But if you wanted to get a heads up and go to him early on, we can still refer it to him. But you can also seek to just get him to give you that information in an email or writing.
Oh, okay, great.
Rather than
Yeah, just
wait.
verbal.
No, verbal's not going to be good enough.
No, I
I
understand.
believe you. But we do, and where it's coming out, it's not coming out right at the intersection, is that correct?
That is correct, yeah. So here's the intersection, right? And it's back, I don't know exactly the distance, but it's back a decent amount, so there wouldn't, in the event that they had to go in there, you know, they're not having a cluster here at that intersection.
And is there another, is it a four-way intersection there? I can't see that.
Middle road comes across,
Right.
and then here's 9G going through.
So I don't know if there's any questions or concerns people have about its placement and its proximity to a four-way, but it's,
And the middle's pretty quiet, but
So you're already talking to DOT. I would just bring this up with them just to make sure they don't have any issues. We had something else that was set back, maybe similar distance from the 9G. They said they didn't have any concerns with it. Just make sure they're okay with it. It's kind of out of their jurisdiction, but it's close. So just to make sure they kind of.
that you're talking about,
Raise some issues.
added to your list.
I believe our design engineer stated that the DOT would like to see it back a little bit further. I actually suggested it to be a little bit closer so that it would not fall within the,
The wetland,
yeah.
too close to the wetlands there.
Yeah, see, this is the wetlands line, 100 foot. That's why I originally proposed it here, but it's too close to the intersection, so that will add a little bit extra.
So you're getting a wetlands permit if you're going through the wetland buffer. But that's the trade-off we discussed last time is anything that's going to come out the middle road is going to need to come through the wetlands. So there's going to be trade-offs for access from the road.
I can also, with what Sean was talking about, I've walked this site several times. I walked it in, it was either January or early February, to see how, you know, visible it is with regards to buildings on Hook Road or Gendron or even 9G. And, you know, you can kind of see, not really too well where the hotels are, but if you walk closer to where the edge of the wetlands are, you can. I was there again, same day that I met with Chief Knapp, I went in there, and you could barely see anything. Now it's 2 weeks later again, I don't think you can be able to see anything. But if the board was interested in doing a site visit, so you can see the stakes that we had put in, I mean, this is a pretty thick site now. In fact, when I came out of the woods 2.5 weeks ago, I was covered in ticks. What are we allowed to do? What we'd like to do is, you know, provide sort of a clear pathway of just, you know, low brush and dead wood on the ground so that it's easier to sort of trace this route in.
At least make it walkable
This way.
for.
Yeah, and then so you can, you know, it's not that bad back here, but it's really bad here, and it's pretty bad right here too. So we were interested in possibly getting just somebody in there with a weed whacker or a small saw.
Is it all just grassland, or is it trees, or?
Well, we wouldn't cut any standing trees, but there's like trees on the ground, you know,
Okay.
with dead branches all over. So we'd like to cut that out of the way so that it's an easier access. And it's just low growth, you know, scrubby stuff.
Why don't, let's continue to talk with you about that offline.
Okay.
We've been caught up before in granting approvals in advance of anything. And I hate to say it's come back to haunt us in some situations.
Sure.
So I think if you want to work toward something much more specific and work with Jim and or the building department on how we proceed with that. I understand the rationale. I just don't, I want it to be so specific that we know exactly what's going to go on. So if there are issues in the future, we're not getting upset with each other about what's happening or not happening, or what has happened that we didn't anticipate happening.
Sure.
Okay.
So,
We need to be able to affect part 617.3 of seeker doesn't allow for physical alterations to the property until we get to the point of determination of significance or an accepted DEIS. So we have to look to see whether something like this.
yeah, I want to be very careful about, I understand the intent, and I realize it's offered, you know, in the spirit of making things accommodating, but.
Just a light touch, we wouldn't be doing any grading or
I know, but,
machinery.
you know, let's get into definitions. Your light touch and my light touch might be two entirely different things. You get my point.
I also just went through 2 cans of permethrin pre-treating all of my pairs of pants, so
See that.
for good reason. I want to have a purpose.
Right.
And just speaking to expediting the site visit, you know, we need to talk about getting it on the agenda. I'm not a fan of having site visits in advance of the fact that it is an even agenda item. And when we go in, I want to go in once And I think there's still, Jim's got some things to talk about, we need some answers on some other things, so appreciate the offer, but at this point, I wait till we have everything before us. Before I go to Jim, anybody else?
I have two quick items. I know there's talks of with that building with the overhang of it being a breakfast area.
That's Jim's doing it.
Okay, great. Well, we'll wait for Jim. Go ahead, Jim. You're cool. And then the other question is, do we know colors of buildings? As you're talking about renderings, I think colors of buildings might be something worth discussing at this point. And I think, if you're putting together renderings, I think our opinions might be helpful to do that at this point.
The quick answer is, Sean, is no. I haven't done that work yet because I wanted to see if there was any fundamental input from the board that was potentially going to change this design. If the board is comfortable with what we've presented so far, and there doesn't seem to be any conflicts with zoning or intention of the zoning, then I'll be happy to move forward to the next step. I understand that you want to see what the exterior is going to look like. There will be material choices, there will be renderings, but I didn't want to do all that work until.
Yeah, I just don't know if anyone on this board has some thoughts on that as you're, if you come back with, Snow White, I'm making a joke, but that, I don't know if there's any opinions that the board has tonight to help. Maybe
Well,
soon.
I think when we come into conversations in the past about visibility,
Yeah.
which is one of the issues that we'll be talking about here, the tendency of this board, correct me if I'm wrong, has been to go in the direction of earth tones
That's what we intended to do.
that fade into the background more easily and more attractively than something that is going to draw attention to itself when you're this close to the road and other things. So that would be the guidance that we've adhered to in the past that I would just bring forward as a suggestion.
I'd also like to see what the wastewater facility is going to look like in its environment.
Okay. That I'm not doing a rendering of, but we can certainly get pictures of what that looks like. It's a self-contained package unit. I believe it.
Would you anticipate landscaping?
Around that unit? Well, I mean, it's kind of remote.
I'm just
We've just got I think we just cleared an area. Show it on the site. Yeah.
I heard it.
Yeah.
I can read between the lines.
Oh, no, that's the well. It's right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's
So,
behind
it's
Fort
like a
Lauderdale.
little- it's gonna be fenced in,
Very close.
to keep nobody messes with it.
All right, well, we'll talk about that
Yeah,
when we
but-
get to it. That's just a question.
Yep.
Sharon, I believe.
I have mixed feelings about it being open. I think if it's designed really well, it could be cool. Could be like a cool, hotel idea. I think, leaning earthy and as many honest materials as possible, because it has a lot of scale, the buildings. And so really taking in the nature around it, I think would be certainly a suggestion of mine. To Edna's point though, specifically around the elevator, which maybe I'm just missing it on this, but can the elevator be tucked a little with maybe a just enclosure by the elevator? So it's like there's a barrier, a wall maybe just there, and then you come out into the open area. So there's a little more buffer should someone be coming right out into the elements. Might be worth a
Hey, Jim,
consideration.
can you go to the floor plan of one of the hotel buildings, please? It's before this, after this. There you go. So, hey, so this is the ground floor plan of building number 2. There you go. So here's the parking area, here's the hotel rooms, here's the covered walkway, right, with an egress there. This is what we were talking about, sort of like a miniature entrance lobby. So people will get out of their cars, come in here. If you're able, you go up the stairs to the second floor, or you go straight through to the first floor rooms. If you need it, here's the elevator for accessibility.
So it is
it's all
enclosed.
self-contained. You won't even know there's an elevator there until you go inside. We thought it was important to provide an elevator.
I think what Delise was asking though is that once you get on the elevator and say you go upstairs and you get off the elevator, what do you get off into? Is it another enclosed space?
Yeah,
or is it
exactly
just
the same. It's 2 floors of that. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And, there'll be newspapers in there in the morning, tourist information, so people have a place to go. They don't have to go all the way back to the main office, except for when they want to have their complimentary breakfast in the morning, should they choose to do so.
Shouldn't be provided.
That's my big question.
Let me just check with Sharon. Anything? Okay, Jim?
Yeah, so the breakfast is gonna be one of my questions, but just out of curiosity, the entrance lobby, is that where you start with the locked doors? So you need a key card or something to get through at the entrance lobby, or is it only at the individual doors themselves? I'm just curious, not that it matters.
You know, we haven't addressed that, but I imagine that you would need keyed access to get into that.
Access.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because anybody can drive into this site,
Right.
right? But we want to limit building access just to people that are staying at the hotel.
So I have a couple of questions, but since you raised it, the big one is where do we stand with Dutchess County Health and your idea for the breakfast area in the, what's it called, commercial space? Because I do think that some of that will have, potentially have a bearing right on the design. If shrinks isn't gonna happen, whatever, so just kind of curious if you give us an update on where we stand with all that.
So first of all, you know, our apologies. Our wastewater engineer submitted the initial design information, but unfortunately, he did not include the administration building. So he did not include the accessory apartment, and he did not include the breakfast area. So that's how that happened. So obviously, our flow rate is going to go up, and that is the intention of this project. That's going to be included, and that, you know, whatever the numbers that have to be supplied to them will be updated as well, so that it'll be sized properly.
But it's not meant to be a full-service restaurant
Yeah, right.
or anything like that. It's really meant to be like a meeting area with access to a kitchen, but it's not meant to be something that's like a commercial, what you would think of it as like going to a hotel and then having a restaurant. Occasionally there's an idea of having like a continental breakfast in the morning for the guests, but that would be the extent of, you know, the services being provided. It wouldn't be like breakfast, lunch, dinner type of scenario.
Would you be wanting, so say you had a number of guests coming in that have either an organization that they jointly belong to, or is there any intention that this would ever be used as a meeting space that provided food service to people? Because that is not how it was originally proposed. It was, I heard it as coffee, continental breakfast, fruit for guests, not a catering facility to groups of guests.
That's correct. It would be a meeting space.
Which is correct.
Which is correct.
Which
No,
is what I just said.
it's correct that it would be a meeting space for guests.
So it becomes an event space of some kind.
Well, I don't know if the code refers to it as an event space or as a meeting space.
And that's
but-
why I think the gist of my question.
But the code, and I don't want to.
Well, yeah, well, this is why we're getting the information now.
Yeah, so I think the code as a hotel, motel, they're allowed to have,
Accessory uses.
as part of the accessory uses, the event space, or the meeting space, I think it's called. I don't want to, yeah, there's a difference,
I
and
understand.
it's a meaningful difference.
That's why we're talking about it.
Exactly. But the idea was not to have outside organizations come in. If you're a guest there, say for a wedding party, and you want to have people from the wedding meet there, then that would be a use that would be, you know, obviously.
Here for the
permitted.
purpose of rehearsal dinner?
Rehearsal, or, I don't know.
Cocktail party?
Cocktail party.
Well, I think
Yeah.
one of the issues with this property and this project going back to the beginning was it started out as it was going to be weddings and events, and it was going to be a venue. And I think I'm driving toward wanting to know more specifically exactly which of these you're talking about, because I think it makes a difference.
Well, my suggestion about how to resolve this is that the best thing to do would be to submit a detailed narrative so that everybody's working off of the same sheet music.
Sure.
And then whatever ends up being the final version of the proposal for that can be baked in to an approval exactly that's.
I agree with that approach. I mean, this way we can use exacting words that mean the things that we want them to mean. There's nothing that's lost in translation. So we can supplement the application materials with a detailed narrative in that regard.
we just discussed the possibility of a cocktail hour for a wedding, which says alcohol might be served. Is there any intention to have a bar of any kind that serves alcohol?
No, not from our, like the ownership point of view. If somebody brought something, I'm assuming that would be permissible, but I'll include that, I'll be sure to touch on that in the detailed narrative. As far as like beverages and things like that, we would kind of contemplate being used there, and what we would see as a kind of the use that we contemplate.
Might be good, I'm sorry, Frank.
Sorry, I think this comes, what I seem to hear people saying is something that I think the code refers to as customary uses. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah.
And are the customary uses different for a motel than they would be for a hotel?
So that's contained in the code, I believe, and I don't want to misspeak, but there are differences between what's permissible in the code based on whether it's a hotel or a motel, and that when we talk about an event space, which would be something different. So part of my goal in drafting that narrative is to eliminate any type of ambiguity or confusion that could arise and basically track the code and make sure that our use is consistent with what's contemplated by the code for hotel motel use.
John, that was just going to be my comment. I think you can almost use this as an outline, right? So
Yeah.
you can go through, and and I don't believe we have any recreational facilities proposed, so if there are recreational facilities, you can say there aren't proposed.
Other than, we were thinking about your last comment, Craig, about trails possibly, or some type of things along that nature, but nothing like a pool or anything.
But that way we can clearly define how you're meeting, each of the elements here. So I think it would make a decent outline.
Yes, and that's what I'll do.
Maybe when you're thinking about putting together your narrative, I guess I'd be asking you to think about what you're going to say on your website and how you're going to be promoting it. Will tell me a lot about what you want the potential visitor to understand they can access when they come to this place. What are they choosing it for? So, try and think about it from that angle, like how high up in the what it's going to do is it host a cocktail party as opposed to
Host a
have a
wedding.
continental breakfast?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think when it becomes a wedding, it becomes an event. That's how I.
No, I agree.
So I'm just saying, put that,
Yep.
that sort of.
No, I think that'll be a very useful exercise. Definitely.
Just this weekend, there was the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride, where guys dress up in, fancy duds and ride around on their antique motorcycles. And I could see like a group of them all staying at that place for this one weekend, and, they need a place to, have a toast and then set off for their ride. And, that kind of space would be, I think within.
More in line with.
Right.
Yeah.
But somebody scheduling a banquet or like having a timeshare presentation, maybe is a little
But
bit.
there's nuances here
Yeah.
that we'd like to really see, as John said, fleshed out in the narrative so that we're all going into this with the same expectations.
Very good.
Anyone else?
Okay, I have one other thing to add.
Jim's got a couple more.
Okay.
Coordination with the neighbor pizza place, getting the sidewalk connected through, is that moving forward?
We've tried twice, and the manager locally hasn't been there the 2 times that I stopped by to discuss it. When I did discuss it with her previous to that, she was very excited about the idea of the sidewalk, going towards Four Brothers. But I haven't been able to talk to her about the extension, 20 feet or wherever it's going to be into there. I'm sure they're going to be fine with it. I just don't have an answer yet.
Yeah, and I understand it's off-site, but if you can coordinate that, let's get the coordination going, so we can talk about that as kind of one cohesive thing, that would be fantastic. Because again, we don't want people walking down 9G or driving 100 feet to get over there if we don't have to. So I appreciate you guys trying to move that forward. I think it's an important kind of community piece and safety piece.
Jim, what would you want on that? Would you want a letter on that from them as well? that describes what they'd be willing to do?
I mean, there's no, I mean, we can't make them commit to anything. I think it'd just be good to know that they're interested, and we're just trying to help facilitate making that happen, you know. But I don't think we can't force them to do anyone we can force you to work on their property.
But
Yeah,
if
so
they are showing interest, then you could be adding to your site plan exactly what the proposal would entail. So we know if they finally agree in the end where it's going to go.
I mean, technically, if they're interested and you're willing, the easiest thing to do would be to have your crew out there and put it in while they're out there. It'd be cheaper for them. We talked about it as cross agreements for legal issues and all that kind of stuff, but that would be the easiest, cheapest way for everyone to do it if that works. But that's an ideal world. And then, you know, my other comment is just that, you know, we did put out the notice of intent for seeker. We got back one response, I believe, Gretchen, I think the only one we got was DC Health. They didn't really have any comments other than they're taking a look at it. So I think the planning board can declare lead agency, except we're not in a public hearing. So I don't know, John, can we do it under old business, or do we have to be in a public hearing to declare lead agency? I mean, it's a public meeting, so I assume we're fine.
Declare lead agency.
So I don't, unless the board has a reason not to, I think it can declare lead agency, just make it official and get that box checked. That's all I have. I can't make a motion.
Who wants to?
I don't live here.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
You don't look for Jim?
Is
Okay.
that
Sometimes we do. What else? Are you done? Yeah, from John?
Oh, I just wanted to mention that, I know you know this already, Sean, but just in terms of the renderings and ripping off of some of the comments, Lisa's comments about the materials, given the fact that the visual impact is going to be part of your seeker review, if you remember the things that you were thinking about during the rock ledge and going through the EAF Part 2 on rock ledge, those are going to be meaningful things to the board when they're trying to make decisions about harmony with community character and what the visual impacts are. So yeah, I would just say I understand the sort of the economic considerations for not jumping into renderings right away, but getting some information to the board with regard to those things, I think is going to be something that's going to be valuable to the board as they start thinking about the secret process.
I was referring you back to the design standards as a good handbook. As I recall, years and years ago with earlier iterations, there were some proposals that I think we all felt at the time that they were going more in the direction of Adirondack style architecture. And I think that was strongly discouraged at the time as not in keeping with the character of Rhinebeck. So I just reinforcing what John was saying in terms of compatibility with the architecture of Rhinebeck, where because other people will be going in there as well. So we want to put our best foot forward. I mean, I wasn't criticizing Adirondack design. We were just criticizing where it's best appropriate and suitable. So.
I was just going to add one thing to that, which I don't know if having like some exterior finish schedule of ideal material use is helpful for us to give feedback on before you go through the labor-intensive rendering process, but it could be really helpful. And alternatively, if we do get the rendering process, at least having some of those, outlined, because, you can only comment on floor plans at this point. So that would be helpful to have some of that materiality.
Well, based upon the comments that we've gotten so far, I think I'm comfortable moving on to that stage. Doesn't seem like there's anything major that's an issue. Right?
Sure is. All right. Is there anything else?
I had one more question with respect to signage and the sign permit application. We should probably be doing that at this stage too, so that we have as complete application as possible before we go to public hearing. Is that fair to say?
It makes the most sense. And although these are not comparable, you're talking about complete sign package, which is both external signage and any directional interior signage that's going to be included. So it needs to be a complete package, not just what somebody's gonna see by the road. And
Including doors, like there's signage on doors, stuff like that, just, you know.
circulation of traffic, parking, no parking, go here, go there.
When you say signage on doors,
Yeah.
what are you referring to?
Sometimes on a glass door, you'll
On the
see
glass door might be.
building number one,
Office,
building number
that's a sign.
two.
Okay.
They all count.
Yeah.
But that doesn't count in the 12 square feet, does it?
Well, I have to go back to that whole
Yeah.
overall.
We're gonna have to look at it. The town code for signage is very, very strict.
Yeah, it's a
and
little,
You understand?
Most applicants who come in for signage with their application, and with the ZBA, many of them, I guess would say, we'll have to look into that, because there are strict requirements. The sign out front isn't necessarily the sign that you can put on the building, there are different standards for different things, so we'll take a look at it, I'll take a look at it and see which ones pertain to this use.
So for example, I'm making this up, but should you choose to name each building differently? You know, whatever it was gonna be. Once you put that sign on the building, it's gonna count. So, you know, why don't we talk offline with Jim about this and come to some understanding that, your point, I think, is valid in that let's start thinking about that
Okay.
overall, because, and I'll give you an example of the one that we spent some time on with zone board, because all the internal signage at Ruby's in the new building to direct people, you know, go here if you're delivering, go here, go, I mean, it all had to be part of a whole sign package. So this, in some ways, is similar to me, you know, where are the deliveries going, where, you know, all of that, so.
And I was just
Rhinebeck
talking to
equine.
Brian, I was just talking to Brian about how to keep calculating it, so if you talk with Jim, you might want to also talk with Brian Tam, just to kind of.
yeah, I've
all
been
get on
in
the same-
touch with Brian regarding Rhinebeck Equine, actually.
Exactly, yeah,
So-
that was one of what he was talking about.
Yeah, I'll talk to Jim and Brian, and we'll see what we can do to get as complete of a package together for the board.
Exterior lighting will also be important.
Yeah, site lighting has been indicated on the site plan so far, but we haven't addressed it with regard to the buildings yet.
Okay. I'm thinking about the potential path to the restaurant, for example. You know, anything, any lighting. that's
Along the sidewalk.
required.
I believe we have that path illuminated. There is a lighting.
But I'm sure there's more exterior lighting that we're gonna need to depict on it, so we'll be sure to address that, I think.
Is there a photometric light?
Yeah, the photometrics are on there too. Yeah, there is a sheet that has that on it.
Photometrics,
Yeah.
This is the light bulb detail, this is the old set, I don't know, but anyway, we'll get into that and talk about it.
and landscaping as well.
And landscaping. You know, one of the things we have been asking is, you know, with all the new light technology that's out there, particularly LEDs, if you're going that route, if you are on IG, if there's a way to look into dimmable lights in places where you don't need them full brightness all night long, that would be something to consider.
Here are timers.
Other timers, yeah, and some of them, they're even, you know, photovoltaic lights now come on and off, you know, at night only. But even if you need some light, but don't need as much, you can get it, particularly the lights that are more visible from the IG, might be something to consider.
Well, all the lighting's gonna be dark sky. It's all gonna be
absolutely.
shielded and down facing, so.
Next steps?
Well, I know we were waiting on public hearing on both the access road, which has been put in, we still are waiting on the community, the eatery, the banquet room. But I know that you know, they've indicated they'll probably put a little bit of a narrative together. If the board doesn't have any more questions, I think you can consider doing a public hearing, or if you'd like to wait until you have a little bit more clarity on that, I think that's fine too. How does the board feel on those?
I'm comfortable that we're at a point where we can go to public hearing
But then we're gonna need a site visit.
after we have well, we have to get them on for a new application. Right now, they're just on as old, as business discussion only.
Discussion,
So
yeah.
the first step would be to schedule, you know, them to come in, make an application, at which point we would then schedule the site visit and schedule the public hearing. Those steps, correct?
Yeah, and my guess would be that we'll want the entire board invited versus the, you know, two that we would do for the smaller applications, so we'll have to work with the schedule. We can try and get the majority.
And we'll share that information when we schedule it with both the CAD and PAC. Make an attempt to get as many of those interested parties there at one time as we can.
They need to be noticed.
So we need a motion to schedule this as a new application.
No, it's scheduled as a public, to open a public hearing.
Okay, so we're going to schedule it, and that would be the June meeting.
The June 16th.
I guess my question is, Rob, would that give you enough time to put the materials together for that meeting? Because obviously we want a full application, we want,
With the narrative.
with the narrative, we want the access road, probably potentially communicate with DOT, I just don't know. So the month out, I'm not.
Historically, the submittal date is 3 weeks before the meeting.
Two.
There's no way
June
that we're gonna get all that done in a week.
It's 2 weeks out.
June
Yes, it's only 2 weeks. Two for,
Well, two's better.
Well, we'll tell you three.
So, yeah,
Like,
the
it's
submission
been
would be
June.
the submission date would be June 2nd for the June 16th meeting.
Well,
What would be the July?
July 21.
July
Well,
21 would be July 2nd.
We could go off the schedule because they haven't been on the schedule.
July
I mean, I could definitely get some stuff together.
We could go to July
Keep your dialogue
7th. We
going.
could go to July 7th,
Which is a deadline of the 23rd of June.
Yeah,
which is a month out essentially. Does that work?
that's a lot better for the amount of work we have to do.
All right, so
we do a site
Okay.
visit before that?
Like, you want the full package, we can't, like,
before opening.
do the June meeting and run like his stuff parallel, and then the second public hearing we have,
I'm sorry,
the full package.
could you repeat that?
Can we run it in parallel? So we submit what we have now, he finishes up,
What would that help? How would that help?
and we can go through the floor plans unless everyone's good with the floor
I'd
plan.
rather get it all at one time.
Okay.
That's July 7th.
July 7th is perfect. Maybe we'll be here.
It always looked like a perfect day to me, July 7th.
Sure.
The only thing, the board's gonna be meeting for July 7th? Is that?
Oh, we don't take holiday.
All right, I didn't know, Sean, I didn't want to get away from
We're not
July
talking holiday
weekend.
when you got town business.
Well, we know
I
you don't
didn't want you
take
guys,
action.
I gotta cut my vacation short because of the public hearing, and,
Anything from the town.
Oh, you'll be back. It's
It's-
Monday, the
your
4th of
your
Friday.
service is greatly appreciated.
So June 23rd is the deadline for the July 7th meeting, right?
That's,
Yeah.
do I have a motion? So then I have a motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carries. All right, thank you.
The only other outstanding item, did we have to do anything special, Jim, for lead agency? Okay.
no, the board just declared it publicly, I think we're good. We'll just move forward.
Okay, very good. Thank you all very much, I appreciate it.
So now we're continuing the discussion only, and this is local land partners, Buzzell Cedar Heights Road, 2-lot subdivision, minor subdivision. They were to be working offline and resolving some of the questions that have been raised. I don't believe we received any additional.
No, when I talked to Chris, and he said it's fine to take it off, and once they have something, they'll come back.
So we're not going to continue the calendar until he's ready with the information. Okay, well, that addresses that. And then town board referral.
Sorry, so that's with regard to both the 2-lot and the 10-lot?
Right, when he has more information, he'll.
Well, the 10-lot's been off. We only reviewed the 10-lot the first time. The 2-lot's been continued for some reason, kind of like a sketch plan discussion. And I didn't really see any reason to keep doing that at this point. I think they need to figure out what they want to do and come back in and submit.
They're waiting for Central Hudson.
There's Central Hudson discussions, and I had some legal questions about whether or not they can actually do this. That's John McKibbs and their attorneys.
Not for nothing, but why would someone want to drive up the power lines to access their house?
Because that's the only access they currently have.
Yeah, that's it, right? They can't.
Yeah, it's the easement for Central Hudson cuts right through their property. I'm sorry, the corner doesn't come to the road, so at the moment, that part of the property is landlocked, with the exception of the access over Central Hudson.
So we've had some conversations with Mr. Montalvo offline, and his client actually owns the parcel of property that's on the south side of the Central Hudson property. So he owns property on both sides. And our advice to the applicant has been to explore putting a driveway in on that piece of property that's on the south side and get it to a point where it would only be crossing the Central Hudson easement at a direct angle. Because the applicant has a right to cross that easement in their deed, but only for a certain distance, and not enough for them to have the driveway follow the route that's proposed where they're going a long distance up the easement and then over to the property. So anyway, we made that suggestion, he's aware of it, he's discussing it with his client, and we'll have to see where they go.
So the property to the south is the 10-lot subdivision that they came in with. So
It's not the one that's directly south of,
so
it's two different locations, isn't it?
I'm pretty sure it's this one right here. I can pull it up, because I remember when I originally reviewed it, I thought it was all one. I think this was all one parcel back in the day, and it got cut by this. I was actually looking through the plans right now, but I'm pretty sure it's a 10-lot subdivision, because when I originally reviewed it, I suggested that they connect right through exactly what you just said, John. Pre-con, I've got to find their plans.
I don't know, I thought when we had that discussion, that he was only talking about 2 houses on that property. Because what we did was we pulled out and, I don't know my clicker tonight, but,
This is the 2-lot parcel right here. This is the.
oh, so this is the one, he owns this also.
Yeah.
Yes, but I don't believe this is the 10-lot subdivision he's proposing.
Yeah. So, what we were told is that he's, wants to put a house somewhere up here on this property. And so, the suggestion was that instead of, sort of coming over here and all the way up here and over, which is what he's talking about, that a common drive be established. If you look at the terrain here, you could get a driveway in, and then the driveway would split here. One end would go to the new house to be built, and then the other one would just cross the easement right there. But
Mine was coming through this, since we're looking at chopping all of anyway, but there's a lot to discuss with that 10-lot subdivision.
yeah,
I
there is.
discuss that today.
And we've had discussions about how, it's a bit more thought, in our opinion, needs to be given to the idea of conservation subdivision with regard to that 10-lot subdivision that has been given thus far. So anyway, that's where things are at the moment.
Okay.
I'm not sure how keen Central Hudson's going to be about the use of that property, or, that length of use of the property also.
There's a lot of unanswered questions, which is
Yeah.
why I think Mr. Montalvo is, asking us to hold up until he comes back, because we're just piecemealing it here without getting all the information we need. So the last thing is the town board referral, which is on the local law and workforce housing.
Sure, so, I believe as everyone knew, the town board has moved forward with the rezoning that's necessary in order for workforce housing to happen on the property where it is now. It's currently zoned, VG, which is Village Gateway, and it needs to be, the workforce housing zone essentially needs to be laid down onto the map, to change the map, and the zoning regulations which apply to that site are also proposed to be modified, starting here in section 5. I provided the board with, I think, some technical issues that I had found regarding some clarity on some of the changes, how they're being made, and what's being made. I wasn't entirely clear on exactly what's being done from a technical perspective, but I did not provide any comments related to the changes that are proposed as it relates to the layout of the, the site or things like that. I think that's a planning board discussion item, not discussion for me as your planning consultant. So, issues like the ones we, written 2 memos in the past for that were sent to the town board, those would be the kinds of things you could discuss. And certainly if you have any questions about my comments, we can do all that. But I don't know if I have to go through these again because they're technical questions just about clarity, clarifications on some of the references. But I'd open it up to everyone for discussion on what you'd like to send back. I believe we probably have to do it tonight. I don't think we can wait for another meeting.
What's the hesitation for, there's a paragraph in here basically saying like they don't want anything to go to the ZBA, essentially.
Correct.
And if it does go to the ZBA, then we can go back to the town board and have the law amended so it doesn't happen with the ZBA. It's basically what that paragraph says in summary. What's the hesitation of things going to the ZBA?
I assume it's a procedural thing, but I couldn't speak for the whole town board.
My understanding, and I'm not quoting anybody in particular, is that there is concern that if it goes to the ZBA, it's going to unnecessarily delay the project. Now that is simply my understanding. It's an extra step that up until now, neither the applicant or the town board at this point see as desirable.
That's really special.
I was present at the town board meeting.
So you didn't really catch.
Got into the daily catch that way. But it was my read of this that it was the town board expressing their desire to not include the planning board in the process. And I don't think there was good reason given for it. I think by law, the town board has the authority to override the judgment of the planning board. There's a process that they have to follow to do it. They have to respond in writing and give clue as to what their thought process is, the reasons why they're doing so. But they have the ultimate authority. Is that not the case?
Well, I defer to John and Kim. I mean, they have the ultimate authority. They can, they make the laws, right? They make the code, and the planning board is supposed to be the ones to follow it through. In terms of making a change to the proposal as you're reviewing it, other than, by doing it through a rezoning, I don't know, John, if town board would typically interject into a planning board review process without doing it through a referral letter or some formal function. But yeah, I don't know, Greg, but the gist of it is, excuse me, they are proposing to rezone it to allow, my take is they're proposing these modifications so that it will be consistent with the concept plan that's been presented. They like the concept plan that's been proposed, and these would be the changes necessary from what's the underlying zoning now, which is the VG, to make that workforce housing work.
Right.
Workforce housing on the
So
site.
it does kind of beg the question in that, we've accepted the concept plan, but anything that gets built on that concept as far as details, if it conflicts with the concept plan, we're going to throw those details out. So it kind of short circuits the review process, which is really to look into the details and ensure that they're consistent with the broader policies of the town, the existing zoning, whatever regulations are laid out. And there's also specifically, they say that they're going to throw out the, was it Appendix A or Schedule A, town
The area and bulk.
design standards are not going to apply to
Yes.
this.
Correct. But the planning board does have some say in some of the design.
Well, and
Based on that.
kind of got called out because I said that it really only allows the planning board to select what color vinyl siding to put on the buildings. And Mr. Carney got up and immediately corrected me, they do not use vinyl siding, they only use hardy plank. Holds up. But I don't know what the condition is of the shutters that, if you look at their development here in Red Hook, they have vinyl shutters on the hardy plank siding, so. Point taken.
Well, elections is all I can say.
So, just to clarify, just from a authority standpoint, so every bit of authority that local municipalities have has to be derived from, has to be authority that's given to them by the state. So local authorities don't have, local municipalities don't have inherent authority under the law. So the state hands down to local municipalities the authority to do certain things, and so they've been given the authority to regulate land use in their, within their borders, and then they've been given the authority to pass laws and to designate boards to assist. And so the planning board exists at the, because the town board decided to bring you into existence and assist the town in processing land use applications. But in designating that authority, in sort of creating this board and designating that authority, the town board still retains its own authority that comes down to it from the state to regulate land use, and it can choose situations where it decides to make land use decisions on its own rather than delegating that authority down to the planning board. And I think this is one of those applications. This is, I think I may have mentioned to you before, but this is something that it's not unprecedented. There was a time when, I don't know if any of you are familiar with a term called planned unit developments. So that was actually one of the first popular uses of this type of framework, where the town boards stayed very involved in whether a particular development got approved at all, and also usually under standards that were different and in some cases relaxed from what the zoning law provided. So, you know, that's the framework that's being followed here.
Well, there is a specific section within the town zone code as to how the workforce housing process is supposed to work. And inherent to that is that the planning board and the workforce housing and open space committee are supposed to collaborate on all of these steps. And it seems like our opportunity to be a part of that collaboration is being short-circuited. And that concerns me, as does the fact that there are a number of promises which are laid out in the workforce housing section of the zoning code, the existing one, that state that there's going to be, for instance, walkability, access to sidewalks and things like that. And I see those things not happening, and the promise is still there, but it's not being applied. And that concerns me, along with a number of other things.
I mean, I can only say to you that in terms of the interpretation of the term collaborate and whether that ends up resulting in a particular degree of acceptance of the advice that's being given to the town board, there's not a definition of that.
Right. I also got in that meeting a read from the town attorney that there had been a number of delays in this project, and it seemed almost as though that was on us somehow on the planning board. But it's my perception that the process has been stretched out to a great extent, largely at the request of the applicant. And I feel like they're trying to run out the clock, and now it's been so late that the town board is going to be willing to accept anything just to get this done. And I don't think that's an intelligent way to proceed.
Understood.
If they were not following design standards, but there was something that came up that people didn't like, could there be suggestions, even if it's, or is that not?
Well, I think, I'm not an expert when it comes to understanding the local law as it's been laid down, but they certainly suggest that there may be opportunities during the process of the planning board's review where we're going to take exception to certain things, and we're going to say, no, we don't think this is right. obviously their source of, or their idea about how this gets resolved is that there's a difference, if I'm reading this right, if there's a difference of opinion between the planning board and the applicant, the town board will resolve that. They will be responsible for coming to agreement. All I can say to you is, I don't believe that as a planning board, we should not review it honestly and with integrity as we would anything else. And if it comes to the point that there's a disagreement and the town board resolves it, we will at least be on record as having identified the things that we find problematic. You know, there's obviously the opportunity for the town board to override us, as has been suggested. But I don't think that we as a board want to go into this already sort of trimming our sails and saying, don't look at it honestly. I have been, you know, there were at least a couple of members of the town board at the meeting that Craig and I both attended when he spoke, that said, you know, they want to hear back from the planning board. They have said that off record. We do believe that you have comments. We wouldn't have looked at the bus issue if you hadn't raised it. So I think we have to proceed in good faith that we're going to review it and we're going to keep raising the issues that we find problematic. And if we're overruled, that they've laid out what the steps will be, it's pretty clear. That's just my position on it at this point. And we can ask questions about, I know that they're excluding a lot, but we can ask questions that I think are information-based questions. You know, why, what about this design? I mean, they don't have to follow design standards. That doesn't mean we can't ask. That doesn't mean that we can't suggest, we think you can make this a better project by doing X, Y, and Z. As we've done with Rockledge and as we're doing with this, we think you can make this better if you change the color, or if you just, and I would just say, you know, as I said, and I will say it here, we have a planning board that I think works hard to look at applications and understand them. That we spend a lot of time before you come into a meeting looking at the plans that are put in front of you and to try and ask intelligent and, you know, questions so that you can approach it from a rational point of view.
But Melody, this is what it says here in this law. It says, the planning board shall review the site plan in conjunction with the provisions of chapter 125 of the zoning law, and may, in the exercise of its discretion, require modifications or changes to the proposed site plan, provided such changes or modifications are not inconsistent with the concept plan.
Yeah.
Well, how do we know what's
Well, that's what
consistent or
Well,
inconsistent?
you know, I would say, I would urge, you know, all of us not to spend too much time agonizing over the particular interpretation of the language. I think that I would endorse following the path that Melody just outlined, and that the board should review and express your concerns. We discussed how the town board has the authority to take whatever recommendation that you give them and accept some parts of it and not accept parts of it if it deems that some of the recommendations are not in accordance with the law. But I think that what makes the most sense, just looking at the good of the community, I understand that, you know, one of the things that's driving the town board is the desire to actually have some workforce housing actually be built and be available to the community, which is an important goal that they're trying to achieve. At the same time, this board has a level of expertise with planning that the town board doesn't have, just because this board is used, you know, that's what you guys are doing day in and day out. And I think it would benefit the town board, to benefit the community, for you to give them your opinions, and then the town board can sift it when it gets there and make their own decisions about it. And they'll have, with the information from you, the ability to make an informed decision about those things.
So we're here tonight to provide comment on the law, is that?
Yes.
Well,
the
understand.
proposed changes.
And the reality is that our comments haven't been our comments have been heard, to date, and the point is, like, they're not gonna change the law because one of us said something, so. In lieu of one, have a nice warm dinner, I don't really think there's anything we can do, other than do our job when it's in front of us, and do the best job we can, and provide feedback. And then, back to my original comment, if you're unhappy with the way the town's doing business, we have elections coming. And like, that's the only thing we can do at this point. And I mean, like, it's like our hands are tied. Like, they make the laws that we have to follow, and they're gonna make the laws that they want to make this project push through. That's the end of the discussion.
So I just wanted to kind of follow up on what John, just to be clear. In theory, what's gonna happen is this or something, some subset of this, whatever it is, will get approved by the town board. Then the project's gonna come back to the planning board to review under these laws and regulations, no different than if we're pulling them off of the code that's written now.
Right.
And, that's what you have to review it. If you find some part of the code as we're reviewing it just really doesn't make any sense, you can send that back to the town board for consideration. Really no different than we would any other part of the code. If we're like, hey, we're reviewing this and this makes absolutely no sense, this part of the code needs to be revised and rewritten. It's so, while it is being kind of ingrained in this law as it's written, that's really the process as it happens already.
Yeah.
So it doesn't necessarily change a whole lot,
Right.
to be honest. I mean, that's how it goes.
Can I suggest or ask something as a hypothetical? In the course of our site plan review, if it were to appear to us that the number of units is at odds with the size and shape of the site, and we were to recommend that the project go forward not with 80 units, but with 65, like maybe one fewer building. It seems like that would fall on deaf ears because that would be at odds with the concept plan. The number of 80 units was determined back, I think, in 2012, long before this project was conceived. It's going to be 80 units, and that number hasn't changed. And I think with this proposed change to the zoning code, it completely eliminates our ability to make that kind of a suggestion.
I don't agree. I can't tell you offhand what consistency with the concept plan means, although there's certainly, if you were to look at, there's only a limited value to discussing hypotheticals at this stage, and I'm reluctant to go too far down the path on this, but a change in the number of units while at the same time agreeing that overall the site is suitable for use and the general layout is something that the board's following, it can be argued that the rest of while leaving in place A, B, C, D, E, and F about that plan, while having a comment similar to the one that you have outlined, can be argued to be consistent with the conceptual plan. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think I follow. And also the issue of parking, which is something that we discussed as part of our initial review on this concept, which was in 2022. I think we made the determination that the plan they had submitted was overparked, and that a more appropriate number was the 1.5 parking places per dwelling unit. And now it's encoded in the zoning that that's going to be 2 parking spaces per unit, in spite of what we might say and how that might impact the zoning. So it's almost like nobody wants to listen to us. They're just going to go ahead with what.
So I understand where you're coming from,
says.
Craig. I would give you a piece of advice and suggest that you try to put aside the frustration with that and instead just sort of look at this in accordance with the plan that Melody and Jim outlined, and sit down and show them, and sit down and do your best and take it, hand it over to the town board, and you'll have done the things that are within your power, and then you're handing it over to another government agency, and you'll entrust it to the town board to do what they think is in the best interest of the community. And making an informed decision based on the information that they've gotten from this board.
And I guess I would try to encourage us to approach it as best we can without looking back at this and that and everything else, and look at it when it comes to us from the perspective of what suggestions and comments and ideas do we have that will make this better. And embedding in that discussion the rationale for why this is better than what you're proposing. Don't just say it's better, but really get into why is this better. Because not only are we trying to influence the town board in their decisions and the applicant in their decisions. Remember, the applicant can choose to take some of these suggestions and not refute them immediately. But you're also going to be speaking to the public, some of whom are here tonight. And if we're explaining why we think this is a more rational and a better solution for Rhinebeck, then maybe we're creating advocates who in the future will understand what we're doing. So I think you're all thoughtful, you all come through these things. We have to take, we have to step back and we have to look at what is coming before us, try to eliminate all the strings attached to it that we have no control over. At least this is my perspective. Review it honestly, the way you would, and when you see a major, we make concessions with applicants. We worked through one earlier this evening. So let's not go into it assuming that everything we suggest is going to be just slapped down. If it is, it will be self-evident. And we will, I don't want to be preachy, but I want to take the high road. Let's take the high road, do the applicant review the way we should, and then we're just going to have to let go.
Yeah, and just accept that in this particular instance, the town board has reserved to itself the final authority on this. And that's sort of what the law is for this project.
So what is it that we're doing tonight as far as the proposed zoning amendment?
We're allowed to see feedback, and it can be heard however it is heard.
Well, Jim has put together, this town board referral, and he's outlined what we've said before. We can say the same thing again. We can offer it again, but the idea that the planning board stands ready to have one-on-one conversations with the town board at any time of their choosing, that's what I say. That we stand behind the referral comments that we've made in the past, I think we all still believe that the issues we raised before are valid issues, and that we're looking forward to being able to discuss them with the applicant when it comes back before us.
That feels right to me, and I think a tone trying to work together in getting this done is only going to serve us.
I agree. I think, I'm very pleased and proud of the way you take these responsibilities, and I think by doing that going forward, we're just doing the job we're here to do. So we'll let you work that out.
Yeah.
So you're going to make a motion for Jim to craft a response in accordance with the board's sentiments as expressed.
We have a motion, may I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, thank you. Thank you. I know this is tough.
At least they aren't taking your boat club, Craig.
It's tough, and it's funny, but it's better to at least try to communicate with one another than to get into those kinds of situations. So I know you will do a fine job, and I thank you for it. So if there's nothing else.
Can I just one more question? And it's a little side note, but when I was looking at the hotel motel, and you see the wetland buffer go literally around the entire structure, right up to the edge. It just dawned on me, you're outside the wetland buffer, so it's your right to develop it. Is there anything related to the density of development? If you're disturbing so much and such large density all the way around.
Cumulatively.
Yeah, how does that not create runoff and disturbance in the buffer within the buffer based on the volume? Because the wetlands went around it and it's right up to the edge the whole way through. And I just thought, I don't know, you don't need a permit for it, but it's really close and it's big.
Well, they will, they need to do a SWIP.
They have to do a
stormwater
SWIP.
permit, and that's where you're gonna start retaining the water, holding it back for a certain amount of time before it's
Okay.
released.
Well,
So there are standards for that.
The other thing you may want to consider is this may be an instance where you might want to pose that inquiry to Eric Kiviat at Pitsonia. So he can look at that and tell you what are the implications going to be to the quality of the wetlands, quality of that habitat.
Yeah.
You know, even if you're not into the buffer, if it's that dense and that close, is that making a difference with regard to the functionality of those wetlands as habitat?
I mean, a single-family house, I wouldn't be as concerned, it's just a lot of structure happening. So anyways, it just
Yeah,
dawned
but
on me.
there-
And it was so close all the way
80
around.
single-family homes would be a concern.
Yeah,
And that,
sure.
and you're taking that and compressing it down into
Yeah.
one site. And I feel the same way about the sewage disposal, because, you know, they're within limits and they're below thresholds, but if you start to look at this cumulatively, you know, the village discharges into the Rhinebeck Hill. It's not that big a stream. The mobile home park discharges into that. Workforce housing is going to get added onto the village, and now this is going to be disposing into a tributary of the Rhinebeck Hill. So, you know, you start to get all of these things that are just below the, you know, the big heavy-duty thresholds. At what point do you have to say that that's enough?
Well, they're not coming back, so let's,
Yeah.
when they come back into the formal meeting, let's get up front these referrals that we're looking at, not delay them so that they know right up front that, you know, we're gonna be looking at having CPL look at the SWIP when it comes in, we're gonna have, you know, refer it if we like to Eric. So let's just make that a point up front.
Yeah, because you can have habitat or wetlands that, if this is situated in a way that those wetlands and the wetlands buffer are going to be lighted all night, even if you have dark skies compliant lighting, that's going to change the suitability of that habitat for animals that use that kind of habitat. So I think it's a good question. It's a good thing to bear in mind and look into as you go forward.
I'll also share that this has come up in conversation with the CAB. And so maybe that's a way to approach this, is that's an investigation the CAB can take the lead on and maybe give a report on, you know, concentrations and thresholds in a small town on a small tributary.
Well, it's an opportunity for the CAB to go beyond just their own site visit and to recommend to the town board that the town board ask for an outside consultant. So, you know, that would strengthen our ability to ask for that as well.
Yeah.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor? Opposed? None. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
So, I'm just gonna say, I appreciate you guys challenging the workforce.